Hey guys, so it's been a little busy New Year's time and I had no time to read my Moby Dick, but I had some free time today and I look chopped as fuck, but I guess that's fine. So let's get to it. The Chapter 7, The Chapel. In the same New Bedford there stands the whalesman's chapel, and few are the moody fishermen, shortly bound for the Indian Ocean or Pacific, who failed to make a Sunday visit to the spot. I am sure that I did not. Returning from my first morning stroll, I again sallied out upon this special errand. The sky had changed from clear, sunny cold to driving sleet and mist. Wrapping myself in my shaggy jacket of the cloth called bearskin, I fought my way against the stubborn storm. Entering, I found a small scattered congregation of sailors and sailors' wives and widows. A muffled silence reigned, only broken at times by the shriek of the storm. Each silent worshipper seemed purposely sitting apart from the other, as if each silent grief was singular, insular, and incommunicable. The chaplain had not yet started, and there these silent islands of man and woman sat steadfastly eyeing several marble tablets with black borders masoned into the wall on either side of the pulpit. Three of them ran something like the following, but I do not pretend to quote. Sacred memory to the memory of John Talbot, who at the age of 18 was lost overboard near the Isle of Desolation off Patagonia, November 1st, 1836. The tablet is erected to his memory by his sister. Sacred to the memory of Robert Long, Willis Ellery, Nathan Coleman, Walter Kenny, Seth Macy, and Samuel Clegg, forming one of boat's crews of the ship Eliza, who were towed out of sight by a whale on the offshore ground in the Pacific, December 31st, 1839. This marble is here placed by their surviving shipmates, sacred to the memory of the late Captain Ezekiel Hardy, who in the bows of his boat was killed by a sperm whale on the coast of Japan, August 3rd, 1833. This tablet is erected to his memory by his widow. Shaking off the sleet from my ice-glazed hat and jacket, I seated myself near the door, and turning sideways was surprised to see the keg near me. Affected by the solemnity of the scene, there was a wondering gaze of incredulous curiosity in his countenance. This savage was the only person present who seemed to notice my entrance, because he was the only one who could not read, and therefore was not reading those frigid inscriptions on the wall. Whether any of the relatives of the seamen whose names appeared there were now among the congregation, I knew not. But so many are the unrecorded accidents in the fishery, and so plainly did the several women present were the countenance, if not the trapping of some unceasing grief, that I feel sure that here before me were assembled those in whose unhealing hearts the sight of those bleak tablets sympathetically caused the old wounds to bleed afresh. Oh, ye who did lie buried beneath the green grass, who standing among flowers can say, Here, here lies my beloved. Ye know not the desolation that broods in bosoms like these. What bitter blanks in those black bordered marbles which cover no ashes. What despair in those immovable inscriptions. What deadly voids and unbidden infidelities in the lines that seem to gnaw upon all faith and refuse resurrections to the being who have placelessly perished without a grave. As well might those tablets stand in the cave of Elephanta as here. In what senses of living creatures, the dead of mankind are included, why it is that the universal proverb says of them, that they tell no tales, though containing more secrets than the good Vincent. How it is that to his name who yesterday departed for the other world, we prefix so significant and infidel a word, and yet do not thus entitle him. If he but embarks for the remotest Indies of this living earth, why the life insurance companies pay death forfeitures upon immortals? In what eternal, unstirring paralysis and deadly hopeless trance yet lies antique Adam who died 60 round centuries ago? How it is that we still refuse to be comforted for those we nevertheless maintain are dwelling in unspeakable bliss? Why all the living so strive to hush all the dead? wherefore but the rumors of knocking in a tomb will terrify a whole city. All these things are not without their meanings. But faith, like a jackal, feeds among the tombs, and even from these dead doubts she gathers her most vital hope. It needs scarcely to be told with what feelings on the eve of the Nantucket voyage I regarded those marble tablets, and by the murky light of that darkened, doleful day read the fate of the whalemen who had gone before me. Yes, Ishmael, the same fate may be thine. But somehow I grew merry again. Delightful inducement to embark. Fine chance for promotion. It seems I, a stowboat, will make me immortal by brevet. Yes, there is death in this business of whaling, a speechlessly quick, chaotic bundling of a man into eternity. But what then? Methink we have hugely mistaken this matter of life and death. Methinks that what they call my shadow here on earth is my true substance. Methinks that in looking at things spiritual, we are too much like oysters observing the sun through the water, and thinking that thick water the thinnest of air. Methinks my body is but the lees of my better being. In fact, take my body who will, take it I say, it is not me, and therefore 3 cheers for Nantucket, and come a stow boat, and stow body when they will, for stave my body, Joe himself cannot. Chapter 8. The Pulpit. I had not been seated very long ere a man of certain venerable robustness entered. Immediately as the storm-pelted door flew back upon admitting him, a quick regardful eyeing of him by all the congregation sufficiently attested that this fine old man was the chaplain. Yes, it was the famous Father Maple, so called by the whalemen, among whom he was a very great favourite. He had been a sailor and a harpooner in his youth, but for many years past had dedicated his life to the ministry. At the time now I write of, Father Maple was in the hardy winter of a healthy old age. That sort of old age which seems merging into a second flowering youth, for among all the fissures of his wrinkles, there shone certain mild gleam of a newly developing bloom, the spring verdure peeping forth even beneath February's snow. No one having previously heard his story could for the first time behold Father Maple without the utmost interest, because there were certain engrafted clerical peculiarities about him, imputable to that adventurous maritime life he had led. When he entered I observed that he had carried no umbrella, and certainly had not come in his carriage, for his tarpaulin hat ran down with melting sleet, and his great pilot cloth jacket seemed almost to drag him to the floor with the weight of the water it had absorbed. However, hat and coat and overshoes were one by one removed, and hung up in a little space in the adjacent corner. When arrayed in decent suit, he quietly approached the pulpit. Like most old-fashioned pulpit, it was a very lofty one, and since the regular stairs to such a height would, by its long angle with the floor, seriously contract the already small area of the chapel, the architecture, it seems, had acted upon the hint of Father Maple and finished the pulpit without the stairs, substituting a perpendicular side ladder like those used in mounting a ship from a boat at sea. The wife of a whaling captain had provided the chapel with a handsome pair of red worsted man-roofs for this ladder, which being itself nicely headed and stained with the mahogany color, the whole contrivance, considering what manner of chapel it was, seemed by no means in bad taste. Halting for an instant at the foot of the ladder, and with both hands grasping the ornamental knob of the man-ropes, Father Maple cast a look upwards, and then with the truly sailor-like but still reverential dexterity, hand over hand, mounted the steps as if ascending the main top of his vessel. Sorry. The perpendicular part of his side ladder, as is usually the case with swinging ones, were of cloth-covered rope, only the rounds were of wood, so that at every step there was a joint. At my first glimpse of the pulpit, it had not escaped me that, however convenient for a ship, these joints in the present instance seemed unnecessary, for I was not prepared to see Father Maple, after gaining the height, slowly turn around, and stooping over the pulpit, deliberately drag up the ladder step by step, till the whole was deposited within, leaving him impregnable in the little Quebec. I pondered some time without fully comprehending the reason for this. Father Maple enjoys such a wide reputation for sincerity and sanctity that I could not suspect him of courting notoriety by any mere trick of the stage. No, thought I, there must be some sober reason for this thing. Furthermore, it must symbolize something unseen. Can it be then that by that act of physical isolation he signifies his spiritual withdrawal for the time from all outward worldly ties and connections? Yes, for replenished with the meat and wine of the word, to the faithful man of God, this pulpit I see is self-containing stronghold, a lofty earthen bright stein, with a perennial well of water within the walls. But the side ladder was not the only strange feature of the place, borrowed from the chaplain's former seafaring. Between the marble cenotaphs on the either hand of the pulpit, the wall which formed its back was adorned with a large painting representing a gallant ship beating against terrible storm of a lee coast of black rocks and snowy breakers. But high above the flying scud and dark rolling clouds, there floated a little isle of sunlight, from which beamed forth an angel's face, and this bright face shed a distinct spot of radiance upon the ship's tossed deck, something like that silver plate now inserted into the Victory's plank where Nelson fell. Ah, noble ship, the angel seemed to say, beat on, thou noble ship, and bear a hardy helm, for lo, the sun is breaking through, the clouds are rolling off, serenest azure is at hand. Nor was the pulpit itself without a trace of the same sea taste that had achieved the ladder and the picture. Its panelled front was in the likeness of ship's bluff bows, and the Holy Bible rested on the projecting piece of scroll work, fashioned after ship's fiddle-headed beak. What could be more full of meaning, for the pulpit is ever this earth's foremost part. All the rest comes in its rear. The pulpit leads the world. For thence it is the storm of God's quick wrath is first descried, and the bow must bear the earliest brunt. From thence it is the God of breezes, fair or foul, is first invoked for favorable winds. Yes, the world's a ship in its passage out, and not a voyage complete. And the pulpit is its prow. Chapter 9. The Sermon. Father Maple rose, and in a mild voice of unassuming authority ordered the scattered people to condense. Starboard gangway there, sideway to larboard gangway to starboard, midships. There was a low rumbling of heavy sea boots among the benches, and still slighter shuffling of women's shoes, and all was quiet again, and every eye on the preacher. He paused a little, then kneeling in the pulpit's bow, folded his large brown hands across his chest, uplifted his closed eyes, and offered a prayer so deeply devout that he seemed kneeling and praying at the bottom of the sea. This ended in prolonged solemn tones, like the continual tolling of a bell in a ship that is foundering at the sea in a fog. In such tones he commenced reading the following hymn, but changing his manner toward the concluding stanza, burst forth with appealing exultation and joy. The ribs and the terrors in the veil arched over me a dismal gloom, while all God's sunlit waves rolled by and left me deepening down to doom. I saw the opening maw of hell, with endless pain and sorrows there, which none but they that feel can tell. Oh, I was plunged into despair. In black distress I called to God, when I could scarce believe him mine. He bowed his ear to my complaints, no more the wail did me confine. With speed he flew to my relief, as on a radiant dolphin borne. Awful, yet bright as lightning shone the face of my deliverer God. My song forever shall record that terrible, that joyful hour. I give the glory to my God, his all the mercy and the power. Nearly all joined in singing this hymn, which swelled high above the howling of the storm. The brief pause ensued, and the preacher slowly turned over the leaves of the Bible, and at last, folding his hand down upon the proper page, said, Beloved shipmates, clinch the last verse of the first chapter of Jonah. And the God had prepared the great fish to swallow up Jonah. Shipmates. This book, containing only 4 chapters, 4 yarns, is one of the smallest strands in the mighty cable of the scriptures. Yet, what depths of the soul does Jonah's deep sea line sound? What a pregnant lesson to us it is! What a pregnant lesson to us is this prophet! What a noble thing is that canticle in the fish's belly! How billow-like, boisterously grand. We feel the flood surging over us. We sound with him to keep kelpies bottom of the waters. Sea wet and all the slime of the sea is about us. But what is this lesson that the book of Jonah teaches? Shipmates, it is a two-stranded lesson. A lesson to us all as sinful men, and a lesson to me as a pilot of the living God. As a sinful man, it is a lesson to us all, because it is a story of the sin. Hard-heartedness suddenly awakened fears, the swift punishment, repentance, prayers, and finally the deliverance of and the joy of Jonah. As with all sinners among men, the sin of this son of Amittai was in his willful disobedience of the command of God. Never mind now what that command was, or how conveyed, which he found a hard command. But all the things that God would have us do are hard for us to do. Remember that, and hence he oftener commands us that than endeavors to persuade. And if we obey God, we must disobey ourselves. And it is in this disobeying ourselves wherein the hardness of obeying God consists. With this sin of disobedience in him, Jonah still further flouts at God by seeking to flee from him. He thinks that a ship made by man will carry him into countries where God does not reign, but only the captain of this earth. He skulks around the wharves of Joppa and seeks a ship that's bound in Tarshish. There lurks perhaps a hitherto unheeded meaning here. By all accounts, Tarshish could have been no other city than the modern Cadiz. That's the opinion of learned men. And where is Cadiz, shipmates? Cadiz is in Spain, as far by water from Joppa as Jonah could possibly have sailed in those ancient days, when the Atlantic was an almost unknown sea. Because Joppa, the modern Jaffa, shipmates, is on the most easterly coast of the Mediterranean, the Syrian, the Tarshish or Cadiz, more than 2,000 miles to the westward from that, just outside the Strait of Gibraltar. See ye not then, shipmates, that Jonah sought to flee worldwide from God? Miserable man, oh, most contemptible and worthy of all scorns, with slouched hat and guilty eyes, skulking from his God, prowling among the shipping like a wild burglar hastening to cross the seas. So disordered, self-condemning is his book, that had there been a policeman in those days, Jonah, on the mere suspicion of something wrong, had been arrested ere he touched the deck. How plainly he is a fugitive. No baggage, not a hat box, valise, or carpet bag, no friends accompany him to the wharf with their adieu. At last, after much dodging search, he finds the Tarshish ship receiving the last item of her cargo. And as he steps on the board to see his captain in the cabin, all the sailors for the moment desist from hoisting in the goods to mark the stranger's evil eye. Jonah sees this, but in vain he tries to look all ease and confidence, in vain essays his wretched smile. Strong intuition of the man assures the mariners he can be no innocent. In the game's stone, but still serious way, one whispers to other, Jack, he's robbed the widow. Or Joe, do you mark him? He's a bigamist. Or Harry, lad, I guess he's the adulterer that broke jail in old Gomorrah. Or be like one of the missing murderers from Sodom. Another runs to read the bill that's stuck against the spile upon the wharf to which the ship is moored, offering 500 gold coins for the apprehension of a parricide, and containing a description of his person. He reads and looks from Jonah to the bill, while all his sympathetic shipmates now crowd round Jonah, prepared to lay their hands upon him. Frighted Jonah trembles, and summoning all his boldness to his face, only looks so much the more covered. He will not confess himself suspected, but that itself is a strong suspicion. So he makes the best of it, and when the sailors find him not to be the man that is advertised, they let him pass, and he descends into a cabin. Who's there? Cries the cabin at his busy desk, hurriedly making out his paper for the customs. Who's there? Oh, how that harmless question mangles Jonah. For the instant he almost turns to flee again, but he rallies. I seek a passage in this ship to Tarshish. How soon sail ye, sir? Thus far the busy captain had not looked up to Jonah, though the man now stands before him. But no sooner does he hear the hollow voice than he starts scrutinizing a glance. We sail with the next coming tide. At last he slowly answered, still intently eyeing him. No sooner, sir? Soon enough for any honest man that goes a passenger. Ha, Jonah, that's another step. But he swiftly calls away the captain from that scent. I'll sail with you, he says. The passage money, how much is that? I'll pay now. For it is particularly written, shipmates, as if it were a thing not to be overlooked in this history, that he paid the fare thereof ere the craft did sail. And taken with the context, this is full of meaning. Now Jonah's captain, shipmate, was one whose discernment detects crime in any, but whose cupidly exposes it only in the penniless. In this world, shipmates, sin that pays its way, can travel freely and without password, whereas virtue, if pauper, is stopped at all frontiers. So Jonah's captain prepares to test the length of Jonah's purse. Ere he judges him openly, he charges him thrice the usual sum, and it's assented to. Then the captain knows that Jonah is a fugitive, but at the same time resolves to help fight flight that paves its rear with cold. And yet when Jonah fairly takes out his purse, prudent suspicion still molests the captain. He rings every coin to find the counterfeit. Not a forger anyway, he mutters, and Jonah is put down for his passage. Point out my stateroom, sir, says Jonah now. I'm a travel weary, I need sleep. Thou looks like it, says the captain. There's thy room, Jonah enters, and will lock the door, but the lock contains no key. Hearing him foolishly fumbling there, the captain laughs slowly to himself and mutters something about the door of convict's cell being never allowed to be locked within. All dressed and dusty as he is, Jonah throws himself into his berth and finds the little stateroom ceiling almost resting on his forehead. The air is closed, and Jonah grasps. Then in that contrasted hole, sunk two beneath the ship's waterline, Jonah feels the heralding presentiment of that stifling hour, when the whale shall hold him in the smallest of his bowels wars. Screwed at its axis against the side, a swinging lamp slightly oscillates in Jonah's room, and the ship, heeling over towards the wharf with the weight of the last bales received, the lamp, flame and all, though in slight motion, still maintains a permanent obliquity with reference to the moon, though in truth infallibly straight itself, but made obvious the false, lying levels among which it hung. The lamp alarms and frightens Jonah, as lying in his berth his tormented eyes roll around the table, and this thus far successfully fugitive finds no refuge for his restless glance. But that contradiction in the lamp more and more appalls him. The floor, the ceiling, and the side, all awry. Oh, so my conscience hangs in there, he groans. Straight upward, so it burns, but the chambers of my soul are all in crookedness. Like one who after a night of drunken revelry hies to his bed, still reeling, but with conscience yet pricking him, as the plungings of the Roman racehorse, but so much the more strike his steel tags into him, as one who in that miserable plight still turns and turns in giddy anguish, praying God for annihilation until the fits be past, and at the last amid the whirl of woe he feels, a deep stupor steals over him, as over the man who bleeds to death, for conscience is the wound, and there's a knot to staunch it. So, after sore wrestling in his berth, Jonah's prodigy of ponderous misery drags him drowning down to sleep. And now the time of tide has come, the ship casts off her cables, and from the deserted wharf the uncheered ship of Tarshish, all careening, glides to sea. That ship, my friend, was the first to record the smugglers. The contraband was Jonah. But the sea rebels, he will not bear the wicked burden. A dreadful storm comes on, the ship is like to break. But now when the boatswain calls all hands to lighten her, when boxes, bales, jars are clattering overboard, when the wind is shrieking, and the men are yelling, and every plank thunder with the trampling feet right over Jonah's head, In all this raging tumult, Jonah sleeps his hideous sleep. He sees no black sky and raging sea, feels not the reeling timbers, and little hear he or heeds he the far rush of the mighty whale, which even now with the open mouth is cleaving the seas after him. Aye, shipmates, Jonah was gone down into the sides of the ship, a berth in the cabin as I have taken it, and was fast asleep. But the frightened master comes to him, shrieks in his dead ear, "What meanest thou, O sleeper, arise?" Startled from his lethargy by the direful cry, Jonah staggers to his feet and stumbling to the deck, grasps a shroud to look out upon the sea. But at that moment he is sprung upon by a panther billow leaping over the bulwarks. A wave after wave thus leaps into the ship, finding no speedy whence runs roaring fore and aft, till the mariners come nigh to drowning while yet afloat. And ever as the white moon shows her affrighted face from the steep gullies in the blackness overhead, aghast Jonah sees the rearing bowsprit pointing high upwards, but soon beat downward again towards the tormented deep. Terrors upon terrors ran shouting through his soul, and all his cringing attitude, the god fugitive is now too plainly known. The sailors mark him, more and more certain grow their suspicions of him, and at last, fully to test the truth, by referring the whole matter to high heaven, they fall to casting lots, to see for whose cause this great tempest was upon them. The lot is Jonah's. That discovered, then how furiously they mob him with the questions. What is thine occupation? Whence comest thou? Thy country? What people? But mark now, my shipmates, the behavior of poor Jonah. The eager mariners but ask him who he is and where he from, whereas they not only receive an answer to those questions, but likewise another answer to a question not put by them. But the unsolicited answer is forced upon Jonah by the hard hand of God that is upon him. "I am a Hebrew," he cries, and then, "I fear the Lord, the God of heaven, who hath made the sea and the dry land." Fear him, O Jonah? Aye, well mightest thou fear the Lord of God then. Straightway he now goes on to make a full confession, whereupon the mariners became more and more appalled, but still are pitiful. For when Jonah, not yet supplicantly God for mercy, for when Jonah, not yet supplicating God for mercy, since he but too well knew the darkness of his deserts, when wretched Jonah cries out to them to take him and cast him forth into the sea, for he knew that for his sake this great tempest was upon them, they mercifully turn from him and seek by other means to save the ship. But all in vain. The indignant gale howls louder. Then, with one hand raised invokingly to God, with the other they not unreluctantly lay hold of Jonah. And now behold Jonah taken up as an anchor and dropped into the sea, when instantly an oily calmness floats out from the east, and the east is still as Jonah carries down the gale with him, leaving smooth water behind. He goes down in whirling heart of such masterless commotion that he scarce heed the moment when he drops seething into the yawning jaws awaiting him, and the whale shoots to all his ivory teeth, like so many white bolts upon his prison. Then Jonah prayed unto the Lord out of the fish's belly. But observe his prayer, and learn a weighty lesson. For sinful as he is, Jonah does not weep and wail for direct deliverance. He feels that his dreadful punishment is just. He leaves all his deliverance to God, contenting himself with this, that spite of all his pains and pangs, he will look towards his holy temple. And here, shipmates, is true and faithful repentance, not clamorous for pardon, but grateful for punishment. And now pleasing to God was this conduct in Jonah, is shown in the eventual deliverance of him from the sea and the whale. Shipmates, I do not place Jonah before you to be copied for his sin, but I do place him before you as a model for repentance. Sin not, but if you do, take heed to repent of it like Jonah. While he was speaking these words, the howling of the shrieking, slanting storm without seemed to add new power to the preacher, who, when describing Jonah's sea storm, seemed tossed by the storm himself. His deep chest heaved as with the ground swell, his tossed arms seemed the warring elements at work, and the thunders that rolled away from off his swarthy brow, and light leaping from his eye, made all his simple hearers look on him with a quick fear that was strange to them. There now came a lull in his book look, as he silently turned over the leaves of the book once more, and at last standing motionless with closed eyes, for the moment seemed communing with God and himself. But again he leaned over towards the people, and bowing his head lowly, with an aspect of the deepest yet manliest humility, he spake these words: Shipmates, God has laid but one hand upon you, both his hands press upon me. I have read ye by what murky light may be mine the lesson that Jonah teaches to all sinners, and therefore to ye, and still more to me, for I am a greater sinner than ye. And now how gladly would I come down from this masthead and sit on the hatches there where you sit, and listen as you listen, while some one of you reads me that other and more awful lesson which Jonah teaches to me as a pilot of the living God. How being an anointed pilot prophet or speaker of the true things, sorry, and bidden by the Lord to sound those unwelcome truths in the ears of the wicked Nineveh, Jonah, appalled at the hostility he should raise, fled from his mission and sought to escape his duty and his God by taking ship at Joppa. But God is everywhere. Tarshish he never reached. As we have seen, God came upon him in the whale and swallowed him down to living gulfs of doom, and with swift slanting tore him along into the midst of the seas, where the eddying depths sucked him 10,000 fathoms down, and the weeds were wrapped about his head, and all the watery walls of woe bowled over him. Yet even then beyond the reach of any plummet, out of the belly of hell, when the whale grounded upon the ocean's utmost bones, even then God heard the engulfed, repenting prophet when he cried. Then God spake then God spake unto the fish, and from the shuddering cold and blackness of the sea, the whale came breaching up towards the warm and pleasant sun, and all the delights of the air and earth, and vomited out Jonah upon the dry land. When the word of the Lord came second time, and Jonah, bruised and beaten, his ears, like two seashells, still multitudinously murmuring of the ocean, Jonah did the Almighty's bidding. And what was that, shipmates? To preach the truth to the face of falsehood. That was it. This, shipmates, this is what other lesson, and woe to that pilot of the living God who slights it. Woe to him whom this world charms from gospel duty. Woe to him who seeks to pour oils upon the waters, when God has brewed them into a gale. Woe to him who seeks to pleasant rather to appall. Woe to him who seeks to please rather to appall. Woe to him whose good name is more to him than goodness. Woe to him who, in this world, courts no dishonor. Woe to him who would not be true, even though to be false were salvation. Yea, woe to him who, as the great pilot Paul has it, while preaching to others is himself a castaway. He drooped and fell away from himself a moment, then lifting his face to them again, showed deep joy in his eyes as he cried out with heavenly enthusiasm, But oh, shipmates, on the starboard hand of every woe there is a sure delight, and higher the top of that delight than the bottom of the woe is deep. Is not the main truck higher than the kelson is low? Delight is to him, a far, far upward, and inward delight, who against the proud gods and commodores of this earth ever stands forth his own inexorable self. Delight is to him whose strong arms yet support him, when the ship of this base, treacherous world has gone down beneath him. Delight is to him who gives no quarter in the truth, and kills, burns, and destroys all sin though he plucks it out from under the robes of senators and judges. Delight, a top-gallant delight, is to him who acknowledges no law or lord but the Lord his God, and is only a patriot to heaven. Delight is to him who all the waves of the billows of the seas of the boisterous mob can never shake from the sure keel of the ages. And eternal delight and deliciousness will be his, who coming to lay him down, can say with his final breath, O Father, chiefly known to me by thy rod, mortal or immortal, here I die. I have striven to be thine, more than to be this world's, or mine own. Yet this is nothing. I live eternity to thee. For what is man for what is man that he should live out the lifetime of his God? He said no more, but slowly waving a benediction, covered his face with his hands, and so remained kneeling till all the people had departed, and he was left alone in the place. Chapter 10. A bosom friend. Returning to the Spoutry Inn from the chapel, I found Quickegg there quite alone, he having left the chapel before benediction some time. He was sitting on the bench before the fire, with his feet on the stove hearth, and in one hand was holding close up to his face the little negro idol of his, peering hard into its face, with the jackknife gently whittling away at its nose, meanwhile humming to himself in his heathenish way. But being now interrupted, he put up the image, and pretty soon, going to the table, took up a large book there, and placing it on his lap, began counting the pages with deliberate regularity. At every 50th page, as I fancied, stopping for a moment, looking vacantly around him, and giving utterance to a loud-drawn, gurgling whistle of astonishment. He would then begin again at the next 50, seeming to commence at the number one each time, as though he could not count more than 50, and it was only by such a large number of 50s being found together that his astonishment at the multitude of pages were excited. With much interest I sat watching him, savage though he was, hideously marred about the face. At least to my taste, his countenance yet had something in it which was by no means disagreeable. You cannot hide the soul. Through all his unearthly tattooings, I thought I saw the traces of simple honest heart, and in his large deep eyes, fiery black and bold, there seemed tokens of a spirit that would not dare 1,000 devils. And besides all this, there was a certain lofty bearing about the pagan, which even his uncouthness could not altogether maim. He looked like a man who had never cringed and never had a creditor. Whether it was true that his head being shaved, his forehead was drawn out in freer and brighter relief, and looked more expansive than it otherwise would, this I will not venture to decide. But certain it was his head was phrenologically an excellent one. It may seem ridiculous, but it reminded me of General Washington's head, as seen in the popular busts of him. It had the same long, regularly graded, retreating slope from above the brows, which were likewise very projecting, like two long promontories, thickly wooded on top. Quickegg was George Washington cannibalistically developed. Whilst I was thus closely scanning him, half pretending meanwhile to be looking out at the storm from the casement, he never heeded my presence, never troubled himself with so much as a single glance, but appeared wholly occupied with counting the pages of the marvelous book. Considering how sociably we had been sleeping together the night previous, and especially considering the affectionate arm I had found thrown over me upon waking up in the morning, I thought this indifference of his very strange. But savages are strange beings. At times you do not know exactly how to take them. At first they are overawing. Their calm self-collectedness of simplicity seems Socratic wisdom. I had noticed also that Quickegg never consulted at all, or but very little, with the other seamen in the inn. He made no advances whatever, appeared to have no desire to enlarge the circle of his acquaintances. All this struck me as a mighty singular, yet upon second thought there was something almost sublime in it. Here was a man some 20,000 miles from home, by the way of Cape Horn, that is, which was the only way he could get there, thrown among people as strange to him as though he were in the planet Jupiter, and yet he seemed entirely at his ease, preserving utmost serenity, content with his own companionship, always equal to himself. Surely this was a touch of fine philosophy, though no doubt he had never heard there was such a thing as that. But perhaps to be true philosophers, We mortals should not be conscious of so living or so striving. So soon as I hear that such or such a man gives himself out of for a philosopher, I conclude that, like a dyspeptic old woman, he must have broken his digester. As I sat there in that now lonely room, the fire burning low, and in that mild stage when, after its first intensity had warmed the air, it then only glows to be looked at, the evening shades and phantoms gathering round the casement and appearing upon us silent, solitary twain, the storm booming without in solemn swales, I began to be sensible of strange feelings. I felt them melting in me. No more my splintered heart and maddened hand were turned against the wolfish world. This soothing savage had redeemed it. There he sat, his very indifference speaking a nature in which there lurked no civilized hypocrisies and bland deceits. Wild he was, a very sight to see, yet I began to feel myself mysteriously drawn towards him. And those same things that would have repelled most others, they were the very magnets that thus drew me. I'll try a pagan friend, thought I, since a Christian kindness had proved but hollow courtesy. I drew my bench near him, and yet made some friendly signs and hints, doing my best to talk with him meanwhile. At first he little noticed these advances, but presently, upon my referring to his last night's hospitalities, he made out to ask me whether we were again to be bedfellows. I told him yes, whereat I thought he looked pleased, perhaps a little complimented. We then turned over the book together, and I endeavored to explain to him the purpose of the printing, the meaning of the few pictures that were in it. Thus I soon engaged with his interest, and from what we went to jabbering the best we could about the various outer sights to be seen in the famous town. Soon I proposed a social smoke, and producing his pouch and tomahawk, he quietly offered me a puff, and then we sat exchanging puffs from that wild pipe of his, keeping it regularly passing between us. If there yet lurked any eyes of indifference towards me in the pagan's breast, this pleasant, genial smoke we had soon thawed it out and left us cronies. He seemed to take to me quite as naturally and unbiddenly as I to him, and when our smoke was over, he pressed his forehead against mine, clasped me around his waist, and said that henceforth we were married, meaning in his country's phrase that we were bosom friends. He would gladly die for me, if need should be. In a countryman, this sudden flame of friendship would have seemed far too premature, a thing too much, a thing to be much distrusted. But in this simple savage, those old rules would not apply. After supper and another social chat and smoke, we went to our room together. He made me present of his embalded head, took out his enormous tobacco wallet, groping under the tobacco, drew out some $30 in silver, then spreading them on the table. And mechanically dividing them into two equal portions, pushed one of them towards me and said it was mine. I was going to remonstrate, but he silenced me by pouring them into my trousers pocket. I let them stay. He then went about his evening prayers, took out his idol, and removed the paper fireboard. By certain signs and symptoms, I thought he seemed anxious for me to join him. But well knowing what was to follow, I deliberated a moment whether, in case he invited me, I would comply or otherwise. I was a good Christian, born and bred in the bosom of the infallible Presbyterian Church. How then could I unite with this wild idolater in worshipping his piece of wood? But what is worship, though? Thought I. Do you suppose now, Ishmael, that the magnanimous God of heaven and earth, pagans and all included, can possibly be jealous of the insignificant bit of a black wood? Impossible. But what is worship? To do the will of God? That is worship. And what is the will of God? To do to my fellow man what I would have my fellow man to do to me. That is the will of God. Now Quickegg is my fellow man, and what do I wish that this Quickegg would do to me? Why, unite with me in my particular Presbyterian form of worship. Consequently, I must then unite with him in his. Ergo, I must turn idolater. So I kindled the shavings, helped prop up the innocent little idol, offered him burnt biscuit with cookie, salaamed before him twice or thrice, kissed his nose, and that done, we undressed and went to bed, at peace with our own consciousness and all the world. But we did not go to sleep without some little chat. How it is, I know not, but there is no place like a bed for confidential disclosures between friends. Man and wife, they say, they open the very bottom of their soul to each other, and some old couples often lie and chat over old times till nearly morning. Thus then, in our heart's honeymoon, lay I and Quick a cozy loving pair. That was chapter 10. I think I'm done for now, and I'll see you later when I continue with chapter 11 of Moby Dick. The plot is thickening, bro. Plot is thickening. Some friendship he's making with the Native American, am I right? Alright, thank you, bye bye.